If you're into crime dramas and you like content from Germany, Netflix is bringing Woman of the Dead, or Totenfrau. But is this season even worth investing in? In a vengeful quest to find out who killed her husband, a woman ends up exposing her small community's deepest and ugliest secrets. We get a mountain community in Germany where the town's undertaker goes on a search to solve her husband's death. She gets wrapped up in the dark past of the townspeople and may start to lose her own humanity in the process. This season is 6 episodes that are each about 45 minutes long. Now, this tosses us into the story pretty quickly, and it doesn't waste much time before we're thrust into the story's intrigue. There's some very rough and odd imagery we're shown, and I think it's fairly disturbing, but luckily, the imagery is cut together to obscure a lot of the true details, but it shows us enough to get the gist of what's going on. I don't need to see what the actions actually are. I get the context for the scene, and it's enough to let me know that some bad people are doing really bad things to others. Now, Bloom is the town undertaker, and there are brief moments scattered throughout the series where she interacts with the dead who are on her prep table. Now, this has the potential to break us out of the story because it's so odd and obviously fantastical, but thankfully it's not played for comedy, and it does have a purpose really by letting us into the internal conversation that Bloom has with herself. And there are some fairly shocking events that come into play during this show, and I appreciated those because it helps to craft characters who act somewhat impulsively when pushed to extremes. And I like the tension this creates within the story because it can take a protagonist and turn them into an antagonist, or maybe at least blur that line with the character. Now, the mystery angle of this whole story, it's rather predictable, especially with how the camera will focus on different characters as the scene moves along. I mean, it's almost giving too much away, and instead of obscuring something or creating doubt, I found it to be pretty much pointing to someone and go, hey, looky here, this person is sketchy and needs to be watched. I mean, this then, it takes away the doubt or suspicion, and then that begins to dissolve this mysterious tone. There's also a very obvious arc, and I found that to be disappointing because it was so obvious. I would have loved misdirection in this, and although they saved this reveal until the end, well before that, we know what the truth is. Now, there's one thing in this that really stood out to me as unbelievable, and that was the motivations of the perpetrator. We're shown events, both past and present, and for the life of me, I just can't reconcile the jump in behavior. It's like one thing happens, and then all of a sudden we've turned on a dime and now have just complete opposite behaviors to what was displayed before. I mean, even in the midst of horrible actions and decisions. I just don't buy the behavioral shift, and that's what the entire story hangs on. So as intriguing as it is to watch play out, it's hard to buy into. I enjoyed a lot of the filming, and of course the settings, they helped immensely. The mountains and winding roads are treacherous looking, but not without extreme beauty, and these help to establish not only loneliness and isolation, but serenity and peacefulness too. Now, the main character, Bloom, rides a motorcycle through a lot of the season, and it makes me wonder if the director or maybe the DP are really into bikes because there is so much footage of Bloom racing through the mountainside and along the curvy roadways. I mean, some of it I get because it helps to establish a mindset, especially if she's racing in and around cars on the highway. But there came a point where it was noticeable that scenes of her riding were just extended. They weren't helping to tell the story, instead just becoming glamour shots to showcase the Ducati and the riding. Now, I love to ride, so it didn't bother me, but this is an odd choice to include just so much of the footage. I think the story moves along fairly efficiently, and it doesn't get too bogged down through slow storytelling, aside from lingering motorcycle shots, of course. But its pacing is quick, which makes it easy to binge. Now, something that's a little difficult within the story, though, is the actual character of Bloom. She can be sympathetic because of her situation and circumstances, but she's also off-putting because of a lot of her behaviors. She's often very curt with everyone. And I mean, sure, she's grieving, but when she's snapping at everybody, her kids included, it does become hard to want to root for her and then support some of her journey. There is a somewhat clear resolution to this season, but the way it wraps up feels like they want to do more. I'm not really sure there's enough that would make me want to watch more. I mean, despite the predictability of the mystery, this was an okay watch, and one that I did get invested in. The cinematography is great, especially as we're transported to this mountainous retreat and then shown the beauty of the snow-covered peaks. The content is dark, which then creates the potential for a lot of intrigue, but that mystery, it's hampered by obvious villains that are pointed out by the camera movements. While this isn't something to rush to watch, if you do enjoy crime dramas, you can get some enjoyment from the series. There's sex, nudity, a ton of profanity, and some brutal violence, including sexual assault. I give Woman of the Dead 2.5 out of 5 couches. So what are you watching right now? Anything great? I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.